I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for 20 odd years now, and an NEJ activist. I was president of the union for 5 years. So my sort of background as a reporter is in trade unions and campaigning. And recently, about a month ago, we set up this new website called Union News, which is a website specifically targeting trade unions, basically reporting on all the news that they do. It's not just about strikes, which is obviously one of the main things. And if you've read in the media about trade unions, that's all you ever get, really, is people knocking them and slagging them off and saying they're a bunch of militants and they're going to cause the downfall of people, and it's unfair, and poor service users, if you like, poor commuters that have to walk while they get the tube, and the poor people whose lives have been closed and they can't live in bins or anything like that. It's always against the trade unions, and trade unions always have to sort of defend. Finally working. Trade unions always have to defend their actions the whole way through, and we got a bit fed up with that. So we decided that we want to be able to put the trade union voice across, which is what we've done in our website, which we can't show you due to technical problems, of course. But we cover all issues of trade union stuff. We've got a friend of mine called Pete Murray, who's worked at the BBC for 30 years. He's a broadcaster. He does some brilliant films, sort of 2.5 minute films that we put up on the site. You can try and put up a couple every week, and because they're so short, you can access them on a smartphone or an iPhone or anything like that. And they've been very popular. They've only been going for 3 weeks, but those films have already had more than 4,000 hits through doing it, because they're very professional. They're cut and edited properly. And what we do as journalists, Pete was also a president of the union as well. So what we do is that we use our sort of knowledge of trade unions and our solidarity as such to focus all our reporting, and that's what it's based on. But we also address news values to it. Quite often, if you look at trade union websites and they do reports of things, it's all sort of propaganda the whole way, and it doesn't give a balanced view. It's all about putting that one side across. What we try and do is to adhere to news values, so we can think about the story, but then reporting it from a trade union point of view. So basically, it's about getting the other side across, getting our side of the story across. The other thing that we try and do, of course, is that there's so many campaigns going on all the time with trade unions. It's very hard to get involved with all of them when we know what everybody's doing. So what we try and do is to collate it all and put it onto our site. And quite often it's very easy to join a campaign. I mean, these days it might just be sending an email to somebody, to an employer, complaining about something. It might be just signing a petition. But unless you've got the time to go around all sort of 50 or 60 trade union websites every day, you're not going to find out how to do it. So the point of our website is that if the union's doing a campaign, they can load it up on our site, and we'll try and make it as easy as possible to do it. So it's about spreading solidarity amongst all the trade unions. So it's not just a case of, like the NUJ, if you've got a campaign against the BBC, for example. It's allowing us to get that message out to people from all the other trade unions who can join in and join our campaign. And similarly, we've got Prospect campaign that they're running, the one about the Dr. Pierre for the NHS health reforms. It's all very easy to do. So that's what we try and do, is sort of act as a news hub, basically. But with the films, we do podcasts as well. But it's not just about strikes and demonstrations. We cover all kinds of different stuff as well. We've got an interview lined up with a woman who is the new regional secretary for UCAN, which is the builders' union we may know. We think that's an interesting story because it's a very male-dominated profession. So how does she feel being the organiser of that? We're going to interview her. There's also a very young woman, I think she's 21 or something. She's a GMB member, and she's on the TUC's General Council. Again, it's quite an interesting story. You wouldn't read that anywhere else, I think. But it's interesting to speak to her and find out what she thinks of being on the General Council, going to these rooms full of sort of stale white blokes, basically. So that'd be quite interesting to find out what's going on from her. We also do sort of cultural things as well. We've got book reviews of Chow's. We've got Matthew Collinge's book, Hate, about his life in the far right. I'm reading at the moment to review it. We had a good night on Thursday with Josie Long. I don't know if you know Josie Long, the comedian. She's getting more and more political now, and she's really opposed to the cuts. In fact, she's got a great line when she talks about it. She says that with a lot of her artist friends think the good thing about having a Tory government is that it makes art a lot better because everybody's so angry it motivates them. And she says, but I'd rather have schools and hospitals, which is her sort of line. And she's so angry about all this that she's been going around the country now. She's doing what they call an alternative reality tour. And she's going around the country along with a singer-songwriter, very political as well, called Grace Petrie. And they've just been turning up in towns and cities that are not known for their sort of glamour. Places like the Isle of Sheppey in Margate, which is going to Gloucester. We caught up with them in Milton Keynes. And she turns up at Milton Keynes about lunchtime, puts out on Twitter, right, everybody, I'm here in Milton Keynes, where shall I do this free gig? And then everybody sort of tweets in various places. And then they just find a venue, and they announce it, and in half an hour's time, they just start and do a stand-up gig for people. And it's been brilliant, it's been politicising a lot of their youngsters. And one, they said in the Isle of Sheppey, they had a crowd of people because the youth centre closed down. So they had nowhere to go, so they just went to listen to Joseph. And suddenly they got political about it, and so they started they understood a bit about the situation. So we've got a film about that, which is quite good fun. So we're covering that as well. So it's all about the different things. We covered the Chainmakers Festival in the Midlands, which is a bit like the Top Level Artists Festival. I think you don't know, it's a trade union festival. So we cover the whole sort of range of trade union activities, really. It's not just about strikes, it's not just about sort of boring meetings. It's about activism and encourage people to become active and do things and join other unions' campaigns as well as the cultural side of stuff. So we've only been going for a month now, but it's been pretty good so far. I think we've had more than 10,000 page hits or something in those 3 weeks, which apparently is, I don't really know enough about the internet, I know about the news side, but apparently that's quite good. If we get the chance, we'll show you the DVD which explains why we're doing it. Because we're also applying analytical stuff as well. We've got a film that we loaded up yesterday about the Southampton strike. If you know the situation in Southampton with Unite and Unison at the moment, they've been having a sort of rolling strike for about the last 8 or 9 weeks now, when they haven't taken everybody out at once. They've just taken various places and doing it, and they've just kept it going like that, which is a good way to keep the momentum. And it's been referred to already as the Southampton model. Is it working? And the evidence seems to be that it is working at the moment, because the council have already had to put in an extra £1 million to try and pay, try and arrange it. And we went down on Thursday, because Unite are there as well. Unite called everybody out for that day. So we went down to the rally and spoke to them about it. But again, we didn't just do the shouty, angry picket lines things, because that's, you can get that on the news. That's sort of the image of trade unions. So we've done a bit more than that. We spoke to some of the women that were involved in the strike, and just spoke to them on a sort of personal level about how do you feel about having to go on strike. And of course they're all saying, well, you don't want to go on strike, it's not a nice thing to do, but we have to do it. We have to do it to protect the public services. And they're care workers, and they're coming up with sort of horrible stories about how they have to leave people because they don't have time to sort of do their work properly. And it was quite a sort of emotional, personal story, the kind of thing you don't get in the mainstream media. Because you've got to remember, of course, where the mainstream media comes from, and who owns it, and why it's so hard to get trade unions, or certainly positive trade union stories in there. So we've done that thing. We also went to speak to an academic at King's College in London on Friday. We filmed him talking about the Southampton model as well. So we're taking a sort of a journalistic take on it. So it's not just about the picket line, it's about the whole situation around there. I think that's probably about enough really for what I'm going to say about union news. The website is union-news.co.uk. So we've got a couple of DVDs that can hand out, maybe some badges and pens and things. But please spread the word. The other thing we're trying to do also is that we have a soapbox piece. So we allow anybody, it's very democratic, anybody who's got anything they want to say that involves trade unions is being invited to write for them. So we've got Donica's done a piece about this conference, for example. Billy Hayes is going to write something. We had a Guy Smallman, the photographer you may know, he's got an exhibition about his work in Afghanistan. He's done a little piece about that. So all the things we do. So if you've got something you want to write about, then feel free to email it to us because we want to democratise. We don't want to be just talking heads of general secretaries. We want activists and people actually on the ground to speak to them. We're covering about the November 30th thing as well. We're going to be covering that, obviously, in the build-up to it in a lot of different ways. We're going to be focusing, I think, on one particular activist, somebody who hasn't been on strike before, and just follow them. We haven't found out who it is yet. So we're following them and filming them and then following the strike day itself to try and get a bit of human angle to it. Because the important thing is, of course, is we're both trade unionists, Peter and I, and we employ indigent freelancers, photographers and writers to write for us as well. So it's just about getting our story out there, in a time that's very difficult, obviously, with the capitalist-owned media, of getting any decent, positive stories out. So we're trying to counteract that balance. So please log on when you can. I'm quite sure to answer questions at the end when we do that.
Yeah, maybe we should leave it to the end. I seem to be put in a position of being chair. Sean, are you able to show your film now?
No,
Oh,
we're waiting
that's
for a
sure.
laptop to turn
All
up.
right.
So,
Well, in that case, I will go next, although, you know, in some ways the project I'm talking about is rather similar to Tim's, but I'm afraid to say it's almost Neanderthally low-tech. We do have a website, because I'm Neanderthally low-tech, I can't remember the name of it. But basically, a group of us, long-term activists, well, at least two, myself and Dave Chappell, have been going for quite a few years, maybe probably even longer than Dave, who's a very rank-and-file postal worker. And our other editor is a much younger, very tremendous young woman who works in the NHS. And so, well, basically, this is the project that I'm talking about, which is, as you can see, a magazine. I did also, myself, edit this trade union paper, Trade Union News, in the 90s. I don't know if anyone here is old enough to remember that, maybe a couple of people. I brought along, you know, a few copies just for people to take, because I've got extra copies, because I think, you know, without blowing my own trumpet, because I edited for a long time, I think Trade Union News does sort of demonstrate exactly what we're trying to do, also with Trade Union Solidarity, which is, these copies are free today, and I don't want to give them out now, because, you know, these people are reading it while I'm talking, which is a nice tool. But, you know, I would like you to take one, the idea being that if you like it, so I think you will, you get your branch or, you know, workplace committee or whatever to take out a subscription, because we want to be able to spread it like that. And as I say, a lot of what Tim said also applies to this project. This first issue of Trade Union Solidarity is, you know, like many first issues of publications, it's not entirely perfect, believe it or not. There are a few things about it that I'm, you know, not totally happy with, but it's the beginning. It's the beginning of a process, and we're going to try to issue this certainly at least every 3 months. We're aiming for another issue at the beginning of next year. So it's still very much a work in progress, and obviously not as accessible and not as regular and so forth as the project that Tim's been talking about. But what I want to do is to talk about the purposes, both of this and of my previous trade union paper of the 90s. And perhaps I should bring in a rather negative note here and say that the previous project was brought down by what I can only call sectarianism, the attempt of a particular grouping, which doesn't really exist anymore, to dominate the projects to such an extent that those of us who wanted to spread it out across the movement in a non-sectarian way were frustrated in that attempt, and it became so stressful I basically had to give it up. I'm sorry, I know this all sounds terribly egotistical, but I've been told by the Pluto Press stall upstairs that I should also promote my book, which is called Ramparts of Resistance, and which has quite a lot of the theory, if you like, behind this kind of project. So at this point I'll stop talking about everything that I've done and how wonderful I am, and instead concentrate on what we're trying to do with the trade union paper. Our trade union paper, of course, focuses on trade union issues. As Tim says, it isn't just strikes. We've done interviews with young activists and so forth, just explaining, you know, what's happening in their area. So there's very much a sort of what's happening aspect to it, just looking right across the movement to see the actual, you know, resistance that is taking place, or if not resistance, then, you know, how existing workplace trade unionism might be strengthened. For example, we've got a regular feature called Rep's Corner, in which an experienced trade union rep says every week, you know, or sorry, every 3 months, you know, what they're doing and how that can be helpful. We are going to try and make it a bit more frequent than this, by the way. So, really, I think you could say there are 4 main objectives of a project like this. Partly to just let people know what's going on throughout the movement, and by doing so, promote support for various kinds of disputes and other issues that are going on across the movement. This is really done because many trade unions, however active, really don't know what's happening beyond their own little corner. You know, I can remember going to sort of meetings of strikes, which were, this is back in the 80s, where strikes were, you know, national strikes, and you'd have somebody in London who didn't know what was going on in Manchester. So that's actually one of the reasons why I started this magazine at that point. So it's just a question of letting, you know, activists and sort of, if you like to use that tired phrase, rank-and-file trade unionists know what's going on across the movement. We're also aiming to give people information on things like, you know, recent health and safety legislation or the lack of it, you know, these horrible new laws that the government's tried to bring in based on this idea that health and safety is a behavioural problem. And you know what's going on the legal front. That sounds a bit dry, but obviously we know that the Tories are plotting a lot of very nasty action on that front, making it more difficult to go on strike and so on. Perhaps more importantly, provide a platform for activists to report on effective techniques of organisation and struggle. So that's your Reps Corner bits, where people who are already very, you know what they're doing, have good tips for organising, can spread those to other people who are interested. And also, very importantly, to provide a forum for debate, because we don't all agree on the right way forward within the movement. Sorry. Just to give you one example, which is probably a bit controversial, I'm not sure if the whole editorial committee would agree with me, but at the moment there are two lefts within Unite, so there's an awful lot of stuff going on within Unite, most of it not very good, and you know, there's I think they call it Unite Left, which is the mainstream left in Unite. There's also what's called Grassroots Left, which was set up by Jerry Hicks, who won more votes in the recent election for General Secretary than did the right-wing candidate, which is pretty astounding. So, you know, what I'd like to see is a debate between perhaps him and somebody who's more loyal to Unite Left. Okay, so this is what we're doing. We're trying to provide a forum for debate, obviously a news outlet, a sort of, you know, manual of techniques, if you like. And what we want to do in the future, as again, I've tried to do in the past, is you know, extend the magazine beyond just a magazine and start holding sort of trade union day schools on particular issues and maybe small conferences and so on. So it's not just a magazine, it won't just be a magazine, it's meant to be a sort of an organiser. There's a number of other points to make. One is that Trade Union Solidarity is not a sectarian publication, there's no one organisation behind it. In fact, none of the three editors are actually in any formal organisation, or I think Necker might be in some sort of very broad young people syndicalist thing or something like that. I'm certainly not in any particular group at all, nor is Dave. So it's not pushing a particular party line or a particular point of view. It's also really written very much from the grassroots. So I must admit I winced a little bit when, sorry to be so rude, but when Tim mentioned Billy Hayes, I thought I don't want to have someone like Billy Hayes, who yes, was once a fire-breathing activist, but now, of course, you know, was very good at, to use that old-fashioned phrase, selling out the postal workers' strike, whatever that was, a couple of years ago. I'm sure Tim will want to come back to that in the debate, so excuse me for feeling like giving you left hook there. So really, I think we're much more concerned with giving workplace activists a voice. Workplace reps, workplace activists are the absolute life and soul of this movement of ours. We all know that everything's very down at the moment. There aren't very many strikes. The Southampton strikes that Tim's mentioned are pretty terrific. I don't know about a model. If you looked 30 years ago, you'd see that model all over the place. But nevertheless, it's obviously what people need to do in order to fight against this very, very class-aware government that we've got, which is bringing all its weapons to bear upon that only weapon of workers, which is the strike. Think of all the laws that have been brought in and how they're now making it more and more and more difficult. Look what happened to the British Airways workers last year. You know, in spite of their massive votes for strike action, they were pretty much rendered impotent by the horrible legal nitpicking that went on during that strike. And I think Socialist Worker, for example, I will say, was quite right to criticise that. And then, of course, they got wrapped on the knuckles, but we won't go into all of that just now. So anyway, I think that that returns to the non-sectarian point. And what we're really doing is providing a forum for people to speak out. We want those people to be from the grassroots because they don't usually get much of an opportunity to speak out. And just the whole, you know, what's the word, process of getting more trade unionists involved widens that forum, and it has people who perhaps have never actually been involved in something like that, but you know, find a trade union paper appealing because it's talking about what they're actually concerned about. So it's all about what's going on in the workplace, and of course it's all about you know, strengthening the network of activists which already exists in the movement, but perhaps doesn't connect. They don't necessarily connect with each other. Again, you often get this comment, oh, I have no idea. Once people go on strike, perhaps they tour the country talking about their strike, and that's something that happened more in the 80s and 90s, they find that other workers are facing exactly the same problems in other, industries, not even necessarily the same industry as theirs. Yes, another plug, I do apologise for this, I've got a pamphlet called What's Happening, The Myth of Work-Life Balance over there, only £1 each now, because it came out in 2008. But that really does illustrate that workers right across industry, from teachers to telecoms workers, are facing the same kind of very severe, target-related, impositions of working practices, which are very, very difficult and very, very stressful for workers, alongside, of course, the appalling fall in worker standards of living under, the non-pay rises which have been happening over the last few years. So we need to spread the news on those things. Another, tell me if I go on too long, another vital issue that we want to highlight and perhaps have debates around is the issue of internal trade union democracy. Billy Hayes is a good example, in fact, of the process whereby rank and file trade unions vote someone into office because they think this guy is a good militant. Even the, what's he called, Deputy General Secretary, Dave Ward. I interviewed him years ago about the very successful strike against tea working that they carried out, particularly in London. Now, I remember the first time I saw him in a suit, and please don't report this back to anybody. I thought, okay, bye-bye, Dave. The point is, you can't blame the individuals, but as people rise higher in the movement, and I'm saying that's true of anybody here, they are obviously going to be influenced by, a more a sort of ideology that's more related to the survival of the union than as an institution, okay, than what members might be doing at the grassroots, or perhaps workers who aren't even members yet. That's another dynamic that needs to be, identified. That trade unions don't come out of nowhere. Trade unions themselves come out of very militant organisation and struggle, and that's the lifeblood of the movement. Okay, so what we're trying to do as well is not just promote, this awareness of what's going on in the movement itself in terms of what workers are facing at work and how they might be organising, but also, of course, what's going on within trade unions themselves and how that internal direct democracy can be strengthened in terms of arguing for the accountability of reps at all levels and so forth. So in a way, you've got a little bit of trade union theory in there, but being, we hope, expressed in a very approachable sort of way. So I certainly hope, I've been going on for a long time, but I hope some of this has actually come across. And the last thing I'd like to say is, I've already sort of said in a way that this isn't just a magazine, it's also a project to attempt to bring together reps across the movement. We will hope to be having events in the future. But the last thing I want to say is, we're talking at a time of a very, very low ebb in the trade union movement. It all seems very discouraging. We have magnificent struggles like those at Southampton, but at the same time, the lowest level of strikes since statistics began, blah, 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 blah. Well, there are other indicators of worker discontent. But the thing is, what I find very encouraging is, if you look at your trade union history, you see that we've been here before. It's been a particularly long period, but as I always like to say, poor old Karl Marx, after 1848, he didn't see another blip of rank and file trade union struggle until the day he died, because new unionism started in 1888 and Marx died in 1883. So if he can go through however many decades just sort of plodding along, writing Capital, creating the Trade Union International, then I think we too should know that there is light on the horizon, I think. After all, we see things like the Arab Spring, totally unexpected and in very, very deprived areas of the world. And I have...
Paris Commune?
Well, the Paris Commune, yes, that's right, that too. Many, many wonderful upsurges of struggle in trade union history. And, we don't know when there's going to be another one, and when there is another one there, we want a network of activists, non-sectarian activists who nevertheless understand the fantastically significant class meaning of workplace struggle. And that's the message that, in a fairly laid-back way, we're trying to get across in trade union solidarity. So I'll just finish by saying these copies are free for you to take, and if you like it, please get your branch to subscribe. I don't want to give that now because it distracts from the other speakers. Thank you.
I don't think there's a computer.
Right. Yeah. Well, it looks like we're going to have to do this without films, which is a bit of a shame in a media conference. Not a big shame for films, but I'll do my best to do it without the film. My name's Sean, I'm from Real News, which is London-based video activist collective. We've been going for about 5 years, and I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to see that a team of people started this project that they're doing, because we felt for a while like we were the only people making films about workers' struggles from a workers' point of view. So it's nice to see some other people getting out there now. Like I say, we started 5 years ago, and the idea from Real News came out. We call ourselves video activists rather than journalists, and the reason for that is we make no bones about balance. We're completely biased. We're making films as almost like political weapons to sort of try and help struggles develop and get information out about them, but we make no bones about the fact that we're putting things from a worker's point of view, particularly a rank and file worker's point of view. And the idea behind Real News was, it came from initially from a visit to Latin America. We've been making we came out of the anti-capitalist movement originally, and started with indie media, but as trade unionists we'd sort of felt that there was something missing within the radical media scene, which was that workers' struggles weren't really being publicised and covered as much as maybe direct action. Now we were sort of going out and doing all that stuff as well, but we felt that, you know, there was no one systematically covering workers' struggles basically. So we'd been doing it on and off, and then we went to Latin America 5 years ago as part of a trade union delegation to Bolivia, when, you know, the incredible social movements there not only did this incredible fight against privatisation but brought down their government. At the same time, we went to Argentina at the same time, went around the Occupy Factories movement there. And we just saw so many little bits of inspiring action going on. There might not be full-length films in themselves, but would be really useful to bring back to workers and trade unions here to sort of inspire people here. So that's where the idea came from, of maybe starting a newsreel with a load of short films on each one, which would show maybe the most inspiring radical action we could find. Present it to people over here, and then you can make your own mind up about it, but hopefully inspire people into doing something similar. So that's where the idea started from. We decided the way we do that is with a DVD. So we bring out a DVD every 2 months, which has about 1 hour and 3/4 of films on it, all short enough so you can use them in trade union meetings and campaign meetings. And that's where the idea started from. Increasingly we put stuff up online as well, and it's basically been that, you know, as we sort of developed and worked with people, it's become obvious that you need to, as well as having a screening copy. Oh, it's arrived now, brilliant. Well, going back to the screening copy, I mean, the idea behind it was also like going back to an old-fashioned idea of getting people together collectively, showing a film and then being able to have a discussion about it, which will hopefully lead to some sort of action or like developing a campaign or whatever. So in a lot of ways we were using new digital technology to go back to a very old-fashioned idea of, you know, you can go all the way back to Lenin's revolutionary train, where they were showing images to like people who weren't able to read and write to get information out about the revolution. Or I think the thing that really inspired me was, I don't know if people remember the start of Ken Loach's film Land of Freedom, where there's a meeting in Liverpool and they're showing footage of the Spanish Civil War and then explaining what's going on, and then going, right, who's signing up for the international brigades, and there's a big queue of people. Now, I'm not sure that would have happened as much if it had just been someone talking about it. And I think the power of video is, you know, depending on how you do it, it can put you right in the middle of a struggle and feel what it's like to be in that struggle, and you maybe get a bit more emotional kick out of that. So I suppose that's why we use video. I think, you know, like Sheila was saying, I mean, I think our real emphasis is on trying to reflect what rank and file workers are feeling like and what they're trying to get out. And I think a big part of that is actually supporting them against the trade union bureaucracies. And I mean, a case in point at the moment, we've been doing a lot of work with the electricians. I don't know if people know about this because it's not really getting a lot of publicity, and we're doing our best to get the word out about it. But at the moment, there's 8 major electrical companies, building companies, Balfour Beatty are the prime movers in this, who are going out of the national agreements and then just slashing away at electricians' terms and conditions. And the high profile bit of it is their wages are going to go down by 35%, the wage raise, which, I mean, you know, a lot of people are experiencing pay cuts this way. It's absolutely ridiculous. What's been brilliant about this is it feels like the best rank and file action we've seen for quite a while. Jerry Hicks, who Sheila mentioned earlier, is part of a rank and file committee which was voted in a meeting in Conway Hall by 500 people. 500 people in a meeting in Conway Hall. The local construction branch of Unite, which usually got 15, 20 people to their meeting, suddenly got 200 people to their meeting. So they voted in a rank and file committee, most of whom are blacklisted workers who've been blacklisted for trade union activities and not being allowed onto the sites anymore, or being pushed out of the profession completely. So they started by going to Unite and saying, look, we need a ballot on this. And the response they got back was, well, we don't need to start yet, we'll start a campaign around January. The thing's coming in March and they're going, look, we can't wait that long. You know, they're going into overdrive already, we need to start now. So they decided, well, let's try it on a rank and file level. They've been having demonstrations in London, outside building sites every week for about 6 weeks now, with the specific idea of building up a rank and file to a point where they can get a walkout on the basis we can't afford to wait around for Unite to get a ballot. We need to start taking action now. So they rang us up at the start because we've been working with them right from the, over blacklisting concerns, construction safety campaign. They said, we've got this campaign going, can you come along and film it, put stuff out on the net so that we can sort of use that to build for the next campaign. So that's why we've been doing more and more stuff online. So we put out a demo, we put out a film online, then they've been using that to send around to their mailing list saying this is what's happening. As a result of that, I mean, I'm not saying as a result of the videos we put, but as a result of all the activities they're doing, they're now getting demonstrations in London, Newcastle, Manchester, Glasgow. Lindsay had 2,000 people outside them last week. And then on this Friday, we went down to Nottingham with the Sparks there. We got the first unofficial walkout at Radcliffe on South Power Station. So amazing activity going on, but they're saying that the fact that we're putting out videos online is really helping them to build the action. Another example on that is we filmed the Tower Hamlets strike a couple of years ago, which was, again, it was an all-out strike over redundancies, etc. They went out for about 5 or 6 weeks. Again, we were sending stuff around. What they said was what was useful with the DVDs was they could encourage people to go and get the DVD, show it at their union meeting, and it meant they didn't have to spend money going up and down the country speaking themselves, because they could just say, we'll get this video and you'll see us all on that video and we'll show it at the start of the meeting. A lot of union branches are increasingly showing our videos at the start to liven the meetings up, apart from anything else. So, I mean, that's broadly what we're trying to do. I think a big thing for us right from the start was taking the vibrancy and the militancy of the best elements of the anti-capitalist movement into the trade union movement, but at the same time taking trade union method of organisation back the other way into the anti-capitalist movement, trying to get a crossover of ideas there and trying to build things up. But I think all the way along this has been about, we've got new weapons we can use in this struggle, and just trying to encourage people to use them, basically. And we'll try and get a laptop sorted out so we can actually show one of the films. I think it makes a lot more sense when you can see what we're doing. But I'll leave it there because it'd be interesting to see what other people are